So I want to talk to you about a concept called TP Cube. My name is Anant Iyer. We've met some of you at workshops. I look forward to meeting the rest of you in person. But let's get started. So this is a concept that four of us have been working on: Steve Dunlap, Roy Vasher, Angus MacLeod, and myself. You're going to hear from all of us at different points in time. So I won't spend time introducing each one of us, but I want to sort of use this presentation to talk a little bit about some ideas. So let's start with the first idea, and that is the notion of the new normal. And many of you have heard this term. Rather than using the word return to normalcy, the question is, can we end up with a new normal? And what does that mean? So the question with the new normal is, can we be better and more efficient? Now, I've deliberately used vague terms, and the reason is because what that means could vary depending on the company and depending on how you're looking at it. So that is the first concept, the notion of the new normal. Can it be better and most efficient? And what do I mean by be better and more efficient? A lot of us have heard about new technologies being available, loosely classified as Industry 4.0 or leveraging IoT, leveraging other things. And the question is, in leveraging the smart technology, the question we could ask is, click forward, please. Can we think about this holistically? And that's the idea that we want to push here. Is there a way to think about this technology holistically and thereby get more out of it? So that is the second concept. The third concept is there a framework we can offer? And that is what we called TP Cube. And what this framework really means is to think about the technology we talked about within the context of the people you have, the processes you have in place, and the products you're producing. And one of the ideas that we want to bring up is that this is a succinct way to ensure that the strategies you're putting forward enables you to be efficient and emerge better. So let's talk a little bit about this TP Cube framework. And so when we're looking at manufacturing, we're thinking of it as an opportunity. Now, why do I say that we're thinking about it as an opportunity? First is there is an opportunity to focus on people. And that is that one of the things that this pandemic has brought up is the need to keep people safe. The focus really became on people, because if people get exposed, then the unit effectively gets affected. But keeping people safe also meant enabling change, that is getting them the right kind of education so they could come back, whether it's remote, online, or whichever the combination might be, and also a very effective communication strategy. And some of these things you'll hear more from Angus about, the sort of a fairly comprehensive way to think about communicating, enabling change, and ensuring that people get the information they require to remain safe. The second thing we're going to talk about is process. Roy is going to talk about the VSMI, which is value stream mapping with an infection layer. And effectively, what this says is, how do you adjust processes to control infection, but at the same time, maintain the agility to start producing the kinds of products that are in demand across the supply chain? So that is the process side, the second P. Now, one of the issues that we hear about is that which products are demanded by the supply chain is changing rapidly. Many of you may already have heard about discussions regarding onshoring or creating dual sources, many such things. But the supply chain has its own demands. OEMs have their demands and their plans, and many suppliers just have to sync with whatever that demand is. Similarly, if there are items, components that are being imported, then there may be delays in those goods getting there. So all this means is that managing the supply chain to match supply and demand just became more complicated. Finally, I mentioned technology. And one of the things that we want to bring up is the fact that now may be as good a time as any to consider these smart tools. And we really think that those tools adopted right can facilitate competitiveness and connect to the other three P's. So the focus of this framework is to really think about all of these pieces in conjunction with each other. And what I want to do is give you a few ideas on how that might come about. So let's start thinking about, so what we did is between March and July, the four of us worked on a book. So while all of us were sitting in various places, basements, living rooms, bedrooms, wherever, and working, we decided, let's start studying this problem and pulling together. And the way to think about this, so this is a book on Kindle. There was a day last Friday where the book was available free to everybody in the WIN system. And so it's available on Kindle. And what we wanted to do is to think about a TP Cube strategy that can be used. So let me walk you through some of the elements of that strategy. And the title I'm using here is Steering Manufacturing Strategy. As you see the steering wheel, we really think that many of you are in the position of influencing the way your companies come back with a new model. So let's talk about the people side of the equation. So what are some things for us to think about? So if we click forward, we mentioned a number of things. First, and I'm going to do it in a slightly different sequence than they appear on the screen. The first is financial reassurance. I'm sure many of your employees, depending on where they are in the system, need some reassurance that they and their families would have some financial assurance. I know there were periods in which people were furloughed and receiving unemployment benefits, or they were getting supplemental payments. All of this creates a lot of nervousness. To ensure that your employees are reassured, there needs to be some kind of communication directing them to the right place that they get this information. But at the same time, I think now's the time that new skills can be acquired. It's probably self-serving, sitting in an educational institution to tell you about online learning, but the skill sets and the kinds of things that are available are pretty comprehensive, and they deliver the skills in bite-sized pieces. So people can actually learn something, apply it through an exercise, and that might be a way, through the appropriate incentives, to get people to remain upskilled. The third is real-time information. There's a lot of nervousness regarding when are we opening, what are the procedures, how is it that everybody's going to be safe. So one of the things that is required, perhaps more so now than before, is communicating to people's families that when they come to work, procedures have been put in place to keep them safe to the best extent we can. And this allows people and their families to be far more comfortable, and that might actually give you an employee base that remains loyal with you. Now, you might ask, why should I do all this? And it's really the last item here, that these are the people who will give you options to compete. They're the ones who will help you with new ideas, ways to rejigger a machine to produce an item that there is demand for, etc. So one of the words we use is people are this real option. They're the ones who you have in place who will help you think through ways to compete. So keeping them safe, keeping their families reassured, keeping them reassured that you can care about their finances to the best extent possible, that's one piece. And so we have a fairly detailed chapter talking about techniques to handle it. The next thing is process. So if you think about process, just move forward, please. So one of the things I mentioned earlier, and you're going to hear from Roy, is the idea of value stream mapping, which many of you have heard already. Roy has run several classes talking about value stream mapping, and many of you who are adopting lean management practices have already done value stream mapping. What's new now is the infection layer. And the infection layer has two dimensions that manifest different ways. One is social distancing, seeing to it that people are kept at least 6 feet or more apart. The second is touching surfaces. Now, I know new guidelines are coming in and we have to adjust to those guidelines, but till that comes about, there might be some need to quarantine items that you get or separate successive touches, etc. So value stream mapping is really redoing your layout to ensure that the infection layer is planned for and adjusted. And Roy will give you several examples. I know several companies locally have already started implementing it. And so that's something which I think is something that is worth doing right off the bat. And it goes with reassuring people. But the second piece with product is agility. And agility really means using the capabilities of the company to compete. Now, each of you may have your opinions, but the big change is Kodak getting ready to produce pharmaceutical products, and the company literally being potentially rescued from bankruptcy because it's using its capabilities in photographic chemicals to potentially produce pharmaceutical. Again, I don't want to comment anything beyond that, but just use that as an example of readjusting capabilities. During the pandemic, certainly many of you heard about the automobile companies trying to produce various ventilator kind of devices, and companies producing different kinds of PPE devices. The third is product. So under product, if you move forward, one of the things that many OEMs are thinking about, and many companies in general, is dual sourcing. And dual sourcing provides you a backup supplier in case there are delays or shifts with respect to the main supplier. The benefit of being a dual source is that you may be paid a bit more to act as a backup, but that might be a way to get your foot in the door into an OEM by being a dual source. The second is to really think about being a reshoring site, or even think about reshoring as a strategy. This is not an easy statement. This requires a lot more planning, a way to sort of see to it that the total cost of ownership decreases. But reshoring is something that's being discussed by many, many firms, and it may be an opportunity, a significant opportunity. Just to give you a quick aside, one of the things we've been doing here at DSIMI is that we just purchased details regarding all the bills of lading regarding everything that was imported in the United States, which is available for public purchase. And we've been analyzing the details of what product is being imported by whom and from where, and where are the opportunities to sort of go after new growth opportunities for companies. Finally, there's the opportunity to adjust the product mix. This is most clearly manifest in the retailing industry, and you can see that during the height of the pandemic, the product mix available in grocery stores changed because most manufacturers shifted to making what might be called A products, the high volume products, and gave up the B and the C lower demand products. And some of those are coming back. So that's the product mix question. Finally, the last piece is technology. And as I mentioned before, one of the key features of technology, if you move forward, please, is that the new technology that we have a few characteristics. One is that it's scalable. You can introduce it in a modest size, learn from it, and when you're comfortable, expand it. Sensors, augmented reality, 3D printing, etc. is all scalable. The second is it is decentralized. You can introduce it in one portion of the company and test it while leaving the rest of it alone. And you can enable the information to be available in a decentralized manner. What I mean by that is many of you may have read in the newspaper about Ford's use of bracelets. These are Bluetooth-enabled bracelets. And I think these were developed by Samsung. And they automatically give you a buzz or an indication or a light if you're less than, if you're getting too close to 6 feet of another person. Now think about that information. That information can remain decentralized. People get this indication, they behave appropriately, and it moves on. But that same data can be stored centrally so that management gets an idea of where it is people are put in situations that they come close to each other. So the extent of decentralization can be chosen primarily to respect employee privacy. So here at Purdue, we've been, you may have read in the newspaper yesterday and today, that Purdue is developing its own COVID tracking app to keep track of students who are vulnerable. and we've been given details regarding the technology. And one of the things the technology respects is that when a student gets an indication that they've been exposed to somebody who's been within, close to them, they are not told who that student is. So anonymity is preserved as one of the tenets of the Purdue system. So these are the kinds of choices that management will be required to make. Do you want to keep a lot of this identity private and respect all of that, or do you want to make it public in some form? And can that be communicated? The second thing about technology, sorry, if you can go back to the previous slide. The second thing about technology is dropping price points. A lot of these technologies, as their adoption increases, the price points are decreasing. And one of the points I want to make here is, given the fact that we're going to spend more time taking care of people, the effective cost of labor increases. And whenever you think about substituting technology for labor, that change in the labor cost changes the break even for the use of the technology. And so there are lots of technologies we're going to talk about. So let's move on to the next slide. So now let's think about technology. So the first technology I want to talk about is cleaning robots. Now, I don't know about you, but one of the best things we did in our house is to buy this Roomba robot that goes about cleaning the house every day. There are more people at home. So effectively it comes on in a schedule, goes around vacuuming everything. There's another robot that goes around mopping, and it cleans up. What's the benefit? There's the same idea of such robots, autonomous robots that find their way around, go under all the little nooks and crannies and cleans everything. Improved hygiene is important. There are industrial versions of these autonomous robots, and it allows you to not have higher labor cost when you're trying to have higher cleanliness. And for some companies, pharma companies, etc., this was normal, but this is new for the rest. Assistive robots, these are also called cobots. When we talked about VSMI, we talked about separating people, and that really means that we should now think about having a cobots to assist them. Maybe we can click a few ahead now. So sensor-based tracking, we already talked about, Bluetooth, RFID, etc. One of our faculty, Saurabh Bagchi, and his team at Electrical and Computer Engineering are trying to create Purdue's own version of these things. And I know that Steve has been touching with some of you to try to be a beta test for some of these devices. Next, please. Surface and object quarantines, the same. Saurabh's team is trying to come up with a little timer. So as soon as that surface is completed with one, you stick the timer in there, and it puts in a delay, and that delay basically means the pallet or the object is quarantined. Many of you have heard about UV technology for cleaning, and now there are UV robots. As long as people aren't around, these UV robots go around and clean up the system. There are different kinds of virucidal cleaners. I know Bryce is potentially, his company sells some of these cleaners, and they allow you to provide that if you clean with these cleaners, then that gives you protection of surfaces for, 24 to 48 hours or longer. Next. The omni-channel, many of you have already stopped customers from coming to your facility and suppliers from coming to your facility. Omni-channel just means you engage with people online versus face-to-face. So omni-channel is now new and is now part and parcel of manufacturing. Next, please. ML, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. These are things that allow you to build in some intelligence and build in learning with respect to data. More and more applications are being brought up for these applications in the system. Next, please. Video analytics, just like we talked about sensor-based tracking, video is actually a very effective way to collect a large amount of data. And one of the things that's becoming more and more standard is video data can be analyzed by the camera itself to give you information regarding, are people socially distancing, are people wearing masks, etc. And that information can ensure that you have compliance. Next, please. Digital twins, many of you have heard over the last few years the idea of a digital twin, which allows you to keep a data-related copy of the physical system and therefore allows you to anticipate problems, anticipate issues such as machine maintenance, predictive analytics, etc. Next. Uh, AR and VR, these are the glasses that you hear about, augmented reality and virtual reality. And one of the reasons that they become very popular is an interesting article that came out that Intel, which had its machines in a plant in Arizona, needed help from ASML, which is a Dutch company, and they couldn't fly from point A to point B, and Intel wanted to keep these chips being produced. So the engineers at Intel wore these AR glasses, and the feed went to ASML in the Netherlands, and they basically guided them towards fixing the machines. So this effectively is now a technology that speeds up machine maintenance. You just put on your AR glasses, connect up with the supplier guides you as to what to fix, problem solved. Maintain social distance. Same thing can be used for onboarding new employees during the time of the COVID. Next, please. Airflow monitoring is already a big thing. Many of you know that the particulate emissions and the aerosol particles are key. Purdue's doing a lot with respect to clearing out the air. I think we're going to get fresh air every 8 minutes or so in every room at Purdue. And a lot of these things are meant to keep our students safe and faculty safe. And what I've been told by our faculty is for manufacturing plants, if you can, the best thing to do is to leave your doors open and your windows open, because supposedly the lowest danger is if you're working out in the open. Now, clearly, from the point of view of the parts, you need to protect them. But airflow and fresh air coming in is a key feature that now needs to be monitored and requires sensors. Please. Remote learning, I already talked about that. So let's move on to the next slide, please. So here are a few ideas that we've talked about today, at least this morning. First is the notion of TP Cube, which we defined as technology, product, people, and process. And I'm hoping that thinking about them together is something that you would all consider doing. And we're going to talk about this. You're going to hear in detail from Roy today talking about the SMR. Next, please. Agility, and that is adapting the supply chain demand and supply. We're going to hear from many of you regarding what you're doing in this space, and we're going to continue to monitor and think about things in this space. And finally, move forward to please. So when we think that with manufacturing, we're thinking the glass is half full, which really means it has 50% more capacity to fill. So that's the perspective we're taking. I know we're going through periods of some stress, but given the ingenuity of all the workforce and the bright minds that we have here and all the respected managers, we're very bullish about the opportunity here. And we think this is an opportunity to come out stronger, which is what we mean by, next slide. So I want to sort of thank you for listening to this introduction. And we look forward to hearing from the rest of you and getting your feedback.